Countdown is officially underway. This afternoon, we are going to host the Eswatini Revenue Service, represented by ERS Manager for Communications and Marketing, Duduzo Dlamini. He will be with Senior Tax Officer, Tulile Simelane. They are going to guide taxpayers through what is arguably the most crucial moment of the year, the submission of income tax returns for the 2025 year of assessment. We will be unpacking three essentials: what individuals are expected to submit, how exactly the process should unfold, and once returns are filed, which payment channels are officially recognized. But beyond taxpayer compliance, there are broader economic developments that we cannot ignore. And this is why we also have our economist, Sanela Sibia, on standby to help us understand the latest inflation figures, which show a slight uptick to 2.8% in September, halting what had been 4 consecutive months of cooling prices. Meanwhile, the recent Economic Developments Bulletin presents a mixed picture. Reserves have dipped, SME credit is tightening, but exports have surged enough to deliver a trade surplus of over 900 million emalangeni. We'll be bringing in economist Sanela Sibia for that, so stay with us. But before all of that, let's set the ground with our business news. In our first story this afternoon, the Eswatini Standards Authority, in collaboration with the Eswatini Environment Authority, are engaging stakeholders on a proposed standard that local businesses will be expected to adopt when producing eco-friendly bags. The Chief Executive of the Eswatini Environment Authority, Gcina Dladla, says that once the standard is approved, local businesses that certify their eco-friendly bags with Iswaswa will have an opportunity to boost revenue, as certified bags could also be exported. This was during the training at the George Hotel in Manzini.
It is a known fact that the voluntary and involuntary standards can assist in terms of achieving environmental compliance. So for us, we are therefore excited that we are working with Eswasa to develop this particular standard, which we hope will become a technical standard. Being a technical standard would mean we would expect all players in the sector to conform to the standard, not to actually hurt their processes of business, but to assist, improve, because anything that is certified has a better chance in the market for uptake, for exports, for commercialization. That's what we would want to see our industries do.
Milagrosa Mondlane, who is the Standards Development Officer at Eswasa, unpacks the proposed standard.
One of the key characteristics for an eco-friendly bag is a bag that is going to be biodegradable, which is basically using plant-based sources like cotton. It's biodegradable, meaning that it can break on its own on the ground. And we're also looking for attributes such as a bag that is going to be recyclable, a bag that is going to be renewable, a bag that is going not to consume a lot of energy, and the production will not lead to a lot of gas emissions. So those are all the attributes that we are looking at when we are saying this is an eco-friendly bag. We're not just also focusing on just the bag, but also the process to produce the bag. Is it an eco-friendly process as well?
Anita Teblanche, a participant in the training, stated that the standard will play a major role in helping the country achieve its goal of eliminating environmentally harmful bags, thereby ensuring better protection of the environment.
As business people, if asataba certified kutoba standard sinye in the country, which means what the country is looking for, the way we see kube green, kube better ema plastics, kutawuphumelela, because nathi as ema retailers obo soma businesses tawubambisana sonke kanye kanye, where it must be certified bags that we are selling.
Businesses and the public can send their comments to Mondlane at swasa.co.za or at 7679-6521 before the 31st of this month. International standards authorities like the International Organization for Standardization and the EU Ecolabel set benchmarks for eco-friendly bags by defining requirements for factors like compostability, durability and safety. Reporting Nelson Langamandla for Minkosi Nzinisa Manzini.
Let's go for a net break. We'll be back with ERS.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
You are watching ERS Text Talk. Thank you for staying with us. Filing season, the important conversation this season. We bring into the conversation now the Manager for Communications and Marketing, Nduduzo Dlamini from the Eswatini Revenue Service. He is with Senior Tax Officer Tulile Simelane. It is the month of October, and it's a month which signals a crucial moment for you, ERS clients, the filing income tax return for the year of the assessment 2025. We're in the thick of the filing season, of course, the deadline, which is no longer a distant marker now. And this afternoon, we want to zero in on what individuals are required to do, individuals such as yourself and myself, how the submission process should unfold, as well as the channels that are available for payment. With us, these two voices right next to me. Good afternoon to the both of you. Such a critical conversation. I mentioned individuals, and that is where I want to start. Which individuals are required to file here?
Thank you, Nguno. As per the recent income tax filing notice published, also individuals are expected to file their income tax returns, even though it's not all individuals, but it's individuals who have multiple sources of income. That includes individuals with employment income and other income, including a pensioner who has earned pension or an annuity, and other income, which could also be business income. And lastly, an individual who has earned just employment income, but from different sources or different employers.
And I suppose there's certain things that are mandatory for these individuals with regards to filing. What are those obligations for these individuals to do so?
Thanks, Fis, and good afternoon to you and the viewers. So the obligations are quite simple and similar to the ones we have for businesses.
Right.
So we require them to file their returns for 2025, including their employment income for that particular year. It's quite a simple process. They need to first register for their TINs. And then secondly, they should be able to use our tax portal, where they should be able to file for those returns. They can get the tax portal, Tax Easy portal, through our website on www.ers.org.sz, or they can download our TaxPal app, where they should be able to access the Tax Easy portal and should be able to file their returns there.
Yeah, I mean, Nduduzo mentions that it's as simple as the steps that businesses are required to take. Speaking of businesses, I want to understand, how should businesses submit their tax income returns?
Thank you. Businesses need to file using the Tax Easy platform. It's very easy, it's very convenient. Over and above, businesses, even the individuals with the multiple sources of income, also use the same platform for filing, which they can access through the website or the ERS TaxPal app.
deadlines, and deadlines are always a very contested conversation, because some people want to meet them, some do not want to comply when it comes to deadlines, but there's always a penalty for not, meeting the deadline. What are the deadlines here?
So the deadlines for individual is 30 November. So we are expecting our clients to file and pay before 30 November to avoid accumulating any penalties. And we also urge them to file early to avoid also getting some network congestion. You know that when everyone is filing on the deadline, you do find that the system or the congestion is a bit too much. So we'd like just to urge them to file before 30 November and do their payments before 30 November to make it easy and simple for them.
The ERS has always, it has pride when it comes to convenient payment platforms. Do you have several, or do you just have one? What payment methods do you have?
Yes, we have several of them. As I said, that as they file, the system will be able to assess and determine tax due at that point.
Right.
So what we're emphasizing is that clients should make sure that before they click that submit button, they ensure correctness and completeness, and they will know the amount of tax they have to pay at that point. So we have several payment platforms. We have online banking through EFT. They can do their payments through bank cash deposits, or if they opt to come to our service centers, we have two options available. We have the POS where they can swipe, or they can pay through the Momo payment.
And I'm sure you guys have said many times that you have account numbers with literally every bank in Eswatini. Can people retrieve that information?
Yes, that information is readily available through our website or our ERS TaxPower app.
Okay. Duduzo, any conclusion and reminders that you want to submit to the viewer?
Yeah, just as of we're wrapping off, just to mention that the deadline is 30 November. Our individuals, clients should file and pay before the deadline. And then secondly, the deadline for businesses is 31 October, where we're also urging business to make sure that they file and pay before the deadline passes. And then lastly, should they have any information, we are available on all social media platforms, and they can also be able to contact us on our website at www.ers.org.z, or should they want to send us an email, they can send us at info@ers.org.z, and we should be able to assist them should they have any questions related to filing and returning their taxes.
Thank you so much to the both of you, Duduzo and Tulile. There it is. Diligence and accuracy is what they are also reminding you to remember when you are completing, to avoid omissions. So please heed to that. We have more on the program after the break. Stay with us.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you'll go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
All Right, let us now shift our attention to the latest developments in the country's economy. The Ministry of Economic Planning that has released the Consumer Price Index CPI report for September this year. The country's headline inflation rate standing at 2.8% year-on-year, 0.12 percentage points higher than the 2.6 that was recorded in August. And today, the Central Bank of Eswatini also released its economic development report. Noting that trade surplus hit 915.9 million emalangeni in September, up from 213.1 million emalangeni in August, and public debt standing at 38.2 billion in September, which is 39.7% of gross domestic product, GDP. Sanele, welcome to the program. It's quite interesting because when you juxtapose the CPI report from the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development with the one from the Central Bank, which clearly still has the inflation figures from August, right? We recognize an uptick here. But I wonder why the Central Bank report shows us the same figure that we saw last month, whereas the one from the Ministry of Housing and from the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development shows us one sitting at 2.8.
Yeah, no, I think it's more a data leg and a data sharing arrangement that needs to be improved between the Central Bank and the Central Statistical Office, so that, you know, as soon as they release it, they should also be getting it from the Central Bank. And I think it's also a thing of when that report was actually prepared.
They should just create a WhatsApp group.
Yeah,
I think it's as simple as a WhatsApp group. What do you attribute the uptick to?
So when you look at the reports, you would see that what we then had in September, rather, has been quite an increase in, you know, your clothing, your footwear, and, you know, those commodities. So now that in itself is one of those moving factors because, you know, as seasons change, we come into spring and all of those new fashion trends are coming into play. So there was a output that pushed up that inflation. And then also what we saw was, if you look at, you know, the water and electricity supply, that one is also a component there. But striking, Mr. Nxumalo, you know, the one that must have contributed quite more to that inflation was that new tax on a new sin tax that came in September, where we saw those increases in taxes towards tobacco and also on alcohol. So now that has actually trickled to the consumer space.
So structural changes more than seasonal changes, because this is a change that has happened in a matter of weeks, very few weeks.
No, you do expect that, and I'd rather attribute it to seasonal change, because what you then expect to see every July and September is those taxes coming into effect.
Okay.
And then, you know, with the changes in the season, you do expect that to come into effect.
Housing and utilities as the main driver here.
Yeah.
Cost push or policy linked could be the question, but one wants to understand, because with housing and utilities alone contributing over 1.2 percentage points, as it shows here. Is this being driven by tariffs, rental adjustments? What is it? Broader supply side pressures, maybe? What is it?
No, it's more those increases in terms of, you know, the tariffs and the cost structure within the utility space, where we're seeing quite a lot of that investment happening within that space. And also what you're seeing is there is a drive towards, you know, the green growth space. Again, that pushes up the price, the pricing within the utilities. And then when you now come into the housing space, what usually happens is, you know, post April, and then we're going to see these negotiations, and then, you know, when people get a bit of those salary adjustments, it tends to push up the price of housing. And then also with controlled housing, you know, we do expect that increase as well to come into effect. You know, the Eswatini National Housing Board, we do expect that to come into effect, and, you know, it does also signal a bit of relief on households to actually absorb this shock.
Right.
Yeah.
And speaking of households, we are seeing food prices here that they're still low, and it could be either an indication of relief or a calm before the storm, some like to say. But, you know, remaining what is it, 1.3%? That's pretty contained, isn't it?
Yeah. No, what you're seeing there, it could be quite a lot of seasonal factors. We are actually post-harvest, so that usually happens, from June, July, and then August, September, before the next planting season. So most households right now have a lot of, their maize in stock and quite a number of those commodities. And if you looked at Numbod just a month or two ago, they came out and they said they're going to control the price, the import of tomatoes, largely because the domestic output, within the sector had actually increased, and now that somehow alleviated those imported inflation pressures.
Yeah, I want us to look at alcohol and tobacco, and you did, speak on that briefly, because it's sitting at 10%.
Yeah.
That's pretty significant. It could be consumer demand or it's just fiscal signaling, really. But I want to ask you, with alcohol and tobacco inflation sitting at that, are we looking at market behavior or early reflection of tax pass-throughs here?
So it's mostly the tax incidence right now. It's a tax pass-through. We're seeing that that has increased, the tax has increased, and you do expect, the price to increase as well, but not by the margin of the tax, but rather just below, because the consumers will also absorb that 2%, because I think it was averaging around 12%. So it shows the producers have actually absorbed 2% of the tax incidence, and around the 10% or thereof passed on to the consumer.
Should taxpayers expect a steady, a gradual inflation build or stability ahead going forward? Because we want to look ahead and we're entering a new upward trend. Is this something we can expect?
With the coming of Tulatfula and the Pampa Pays,
Yes.
So it's inevitable we are going to see probably inflation for the next month ticking to 9% and probably going to average around the 3% towards November and December, purely because there's going to be this new money and that's going to be flowing within the economy. Demand is going to surge, and then we're going to see households coming back into the spending space depending on the risk factors and the post-COVID recovery factors, that loss of income.
SMEs, these numbers, they're reflecting that SMEs have been hit the hardest. Is it credit to SMEs dropping by 5.6, the signal that shows us that indeed there's been a sharp, contracting that's been going on here? What's been going on?
Yeah, when you look at the numbers, Mr. Ngumalo, they are quite paradoxical. They show that when you look at, say, for example, broad money supply, it has actually increased, which means there is a bit of liquidity within the banks, but we are not seeing that translating to the credit space. So we still see that overall domestic credit is somehow reduced. So now that shows that banks are somewhat wary and a bit cautious in terms of their lending capabilities, because when you now also look at the non-performing loans, they are showing signs of decrease, but still at a very high level, but rather people would say they are manageable. But all those risk factors are coming into the banking sector's risk matrix and decisions before they make those decisions. So we are looking at all of those factors playing together, but that contraction does show that, there is a bit of caution within the banking sector.
I want to get into the central bank report, but with your permission, because you did highlight in the beginning that they haven't really updated what we saw last month when it comes to the inflation figures.
Yeah.
What about the other figures? Is there anything changed there?
Yeah, those ones always change because they are within the control of the central bank.
Right.
Unlike this inflation figure, which is produced through the Central Statistical Office. So there's no data flow. It's the data that's within the central bank on the monthly economic bulletin.
And indeed, they are telling us that reserves have dipped by 9.2%. They're also telling us that credit to SMEs fell by 5.6%. You've answered that already. The country recorded a trade surplus of over 900 million emalangeni in September. I suppose the simple question would be, then what does this mean for taxpayers, but also the savers, the borrowers, and everyone else?
So the trade surplus comes largely from a stronger langeni in the international markets, where, when you export on a stronger langeni, you are able to it does become a bit expensive for your commodities on the international markets.
Right.
So that tends to affect us a bit. But overall, when you look at the fact that we've gone positive, yet we have a strong appreciation in the exchange rate over the month of September, what then that tells us is the fact that largely that's driven by seasonal factors. Because if you recall back in June, July, when we looked at that report, we were actually at a deficit level. So what now this signals is we're seeing exports picking up, and that would largely be nuanced into what we call, your agricultural seasonal exports, which then pick up. And I mean, it's right around this time that you expect the sugar industry to actually be milling and selling quite a lot instead of storing that output. And, quite a lot of agricultural exports as well are happening at that space. And also there has been a pickup in terms of AGOA. Markets have somehow stabilized in terms of the US tariffs, and we do know that for Eswatini we are at that 10%, so we did get a bit of stability back into the markets, and that somehow cushioned our exports, and then therefore we saw an export boom. And then also South Africa is doing very well, economically, given that Eskom and the other financials and the other economic variables there are performing relatively well. So now with stronger demand, relatively stronger demand coming through from South Africa, where, over 70% of our exports are headed. So then we do expect a rebound in the trade surplus.
Right, so let's be our economy speaking on the trade surplus that has hit 915.9 million malangeni in September, up from 213 million malangeni in August. So if you're a salaried worker, a borrower, or a business owner, I think you're informed now on what steps you should be taking in the next couple of months. But suddenly, giving you permission now to take center stage and just give us a wrap-up of what the markets are telling us just quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Ngumalo. So largely what markets are reading, let's start with the US. We do know there is a government shutdown that has entered its 16th day. But what markets are looking at right now is the positive earnings that are coming through from, the banking sector. The financials are doing relatively well, and the calming in those US-China trade relations.
Yes.
So now that tends to be your markets in the upward direction. And also, interestingly, even in the absence of data, what we've seen is, the Fed chair, Powell, there coming out to say, when he looks at the jobs numbers and inflation figures, it does show that there are risks there, and that signals yet another, yet another cut in terms of the interest rates in the US in the next couple of months. So we do expect 1 or 2 based on those sentiments. But on that backdrop, we can see that the Nasdaq, the tech-heavy Nasdaq, has actually edged up 148 points, largely driven by those AI trades. It seems like that euphoria is still there, even though there's a bit of optimism there. And then, when we move on to the European markets, what we see happening within the London Stock Exchange, we've seen a bit of a pullback, given, poor demand coming through from the retail sector. But that juxtaposes with Paris. We've seen Paris going up above the 8,000 mark because the luxury goods space is performing relatively well there. Moving on to Asia, we can see the Nikkei performing, relatively well, back on those record high levels, largely driven by the tech sector. And then you can see that Hong Kong is actually just pulling back a bit because there's still those issues within the property sector. And China, given those strong, the easing of tensions between the US and China, we are seeing China heading for the 4,000 mark. South African Stock Exchange, largely driven by the miners and the financials, is actually at a new record high. Eswatini Stock Exchange has not changed much. And then when we come into the commodities, we can see gold maintaining those all-time highs because of the bit of instability and, the lack of the data. Brent crude remains at the subdued at that 60 to 11 because we do expect, that demand weakening due to the shutdown. And then when you come into the currencies, we're seeing some relative weakness of the Lilangeni today because, the dollar is strengthening a bit and Europe is trading relatively well. Thank you
for your time. Very polished analysis there from Sanesby, and right on time. We thank you for staying with us here on ERS Tax Talk. We'll see you again next week. Have a good day. Bye-bye.